Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and into a nightmare. The docking bay of Kepler Station stretched out before him like a metal cavern. Creatures he had only seen in briefing videos walked around him. Some had 4 arms. Others floated in the air. A few looked like walking crystals that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. The air smelled wrong. It was clean, but it carried the scent of 100 different worlds. Jake's nose wrinkled as he breathed it in. He had trained for this moment for 2 years, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. "Captain Morrison?" A voice called from behind him. Jake turned to see a human woman in a crisp navy uniform. She was tall and lean, with short brown hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Lieutenant Amy Cole," she said, extending her hand. "I'm your liaison here at the Academy." Jake shook her hand, grateful to see another human face. "Good to meet you, Lieutenant. How long have you been here?" 6 months, Amy replied. "I was part of the advance team that set up the exchange program." "Fair warning, Captain. It's not going to be easy." Before Jake could ask what she meant, a booming voice echoed through the docking bay. "New meat. Form up." Jake looked toward the sound and felt his stomach drop. The creature that had spoken was massive. It stood at least 8 feet tall, with 4 thick arms ending in clawed hands. Its skin looked like black armor, and its head was shaped like a wedge with glowing red eyes. "That's Instructor Vexstar," Amy whispered. "He's a Krillian warrior. He's been waiting for you." Jake squared his shoulders and walked toward the instructor. Around him, other new arrivals were doing the same. He counted at least 20 different species in the group. Some were humanoid, others were not. All of them looked more dangerous than him. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Coalition Combat Academy," Vexstar said, his voice like grinding stone. "You are here because your species think you are warriors. I am here to prove you wrong." The instructor's red eyes swept over the group and stopped on Jake. "Ah, the human. We have been waiting for you." Jake stood at attention. "Captain Jake Morrison, reporting for duty, sir." Vexstar's mouth split into what might have been a smile. It showed rows of sharp teeth. "Tell me, human, what makes you think you belong here?" "I'm here to learn, sir," Jake replied, "and to represent my species." "Learn?" Vexstar's laugh was like breaking glass. "Your species has been in space for what, 50 years? We have been warriors for 50,000. What could you possibly learn here that would matter?" Before Jake could answer, one of Vexstar's 4 arms moved faster than Jake could see. The back of the instructor's hand connected with Jake's nose. The sound was like a branch snapping. Pain exploded across Jake's face. Blood poured from his nose as he stumbled. Backward, the metallic taste filled his mouth. Through watering eyes, he saw the other students watching. Some looked shocked. Others seemed amused. "That," Vexstar said calmly, "is lesson 1. Respect is earned through strength. You have none." Jake wiped blood from his face and stood up straight. His nose was definitely broken. It throbbed with each heartbeat. But he looked the instructor in the eye and said, "Understood, sir." "Good." Vexstar turned to address the group. "You will be here for 6 months. Half of you will not finish. Those who do will be among the finest warriors in the galaxy. Those who do not will be sent home in shame." The instructor's eyes found Jake again. "Medical bay is on level 7, human. Get that nose fixed." "No, sir," Jake said. "I'm fine." Vexstar's head tilted. "No? I said I'm fine, sir." For a moment, the docking bay was silent. Then Vexstar made that grinding laugh again. "Foolish, but we shall see. Follow me, all of you. Time to see your new home." As they walked through the corridors of the station, Amy fell into step beside Jake. "You should get that nose looked at," she whispered. Jake shook his head. Let it heal crooked. I want to remember this moment. Jake ... How many humans have been through this program? He asked. Amy was quiet for a moment. You're the fourth. The first two quit after a month. The third lasted 3 months before he had a breakdown. What happened to them? They're alive, Amy said. But they're not the same. Vextar broke them. He's good at finding what makes people break. Jake touched his throbbing nose. Then I guess I better be good at not breaking. They entered a large chamber filled with bunks. Each bunk was designed for a different species. Some were tanks filled with liquid. Others were crystalline formations. Jake found his assigned bunk, a simple human-style bed in a corner. Lights out in 2 hours, Vextar announced. Training begins at dawn. For those species that sleep, use this time wisely. Tomorrow, we begin to separate the warriors from the pretenders. As the instructor left, the chamber filled with alien voices. Jake couldn't understand most of them, but he could sense the excitement and fear. These beings were the best their species had to offer. They were here to prove themselves. Jake sat on his bunk and looked around. A floating creature with tentacles drifted past him. A lizard-like being with scales that changed color settled onto a heated platform. Somewhere in the distance, something that sounded like grinding gears was trying to communicate. Overwhelming, isn't it? A voice said. Jake turned to see a being that looked like it was made of living crystal. It spoke in perfect English, though its voice sounded like wind chimes. A little, Jake admitted. I am Thrakemore of the Shard Collective. I have been observing your species since you achieved faster-than-light travel. You are ... interesting. How so? Most species have 1 or 2 advantages. Strength, speed, telepathy, natural armor. Humans have none of these things. Yet here you are. Jake wiped more blood from his face. Here I am. Indeed, I am curious to see what happens next. As the lights dimmed, Jake lay back on his bunk. His nose throbbed, and he could taste blood in his mouth. Around him, alien beings settled into their various forms of rest. Some made sounds he had never heard before. Others simply became still. Jake closed his eyes and thought about home. About the training that had brought him here. About the responsibility he carried as the first human to attempt this program without backing down. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, new tests designed to break him. But tonight he was still here, still standing, still determined to show these aliens what humans were made of. His nose could heal crooked. He would wear it like a badge of honor. Jake woke to a sound like thunder. His eyes snapped open in the darkness. Around him, alien beings were stirring from their various forms of sleep. The sound came again, a deep, rhythmic pounding that seemed to shake the entire station. Wake up, warriors! Vextar's voice boomed through speakers. The galaxy does not wait for you to feel rested. Jake rolled out of his bunk and hit the floor running. His nose ached from the previous day's break, but he ignored it. Around him, other students were emerging from tanks, crystalline formations, and sleeping pods. Move! Move! Vextar appeared in the doorway, all forearms gesturing. Training. Bay Alpha in 5 minutes. Anyone late gets to skip breakfast for a week. Jake pulled on his training uniform and ran. His human legs carried him through corridors filled with beings that could fly, teleport, or simply move faster than physics should allow. But he had learned something important about himself during his years in the Marine Corps. He might not be the fastest, but he could keep going when others stopped. The training bay was enormous. It stretched out like a football field, with obstacles that defied gravity and made no sense to human eyes. Some platforms floated in mid-air. Others seemed to be made of energy. In the center stood Vextar, holding what looked like a weapon. designed to hurt as much as possible. "Today, we begin combat training," the instructor announced. "You will learn to fight in zero gravity, high gravity, toxic atmospheres, and conditions that would kill most lesser beings. Some of you will not survive. Consider this a blessing. Better to die here than fail your species in real battle." Jake lined up with the others. To his left stood a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. To his right, a being of pure energy flickered in and out of existence. He had never felt more human, more limited, more fragile. "Human," Vextar called out. "You first." Jake stepped forward. The instructor pointed to a course that seemed designed by someone who hated physics. Spinning blades, crushing walls, and obstacles that moved when you weren't looking at them. "Complete the course," Vextar said. "Try not to die immediately. It would be embarrassing for your species." Jake studied the course. Every instinct told him it was impossible. The gaps were too wide for human jumping ability. The obstacles moved too fast for human reflexes. But he had learned something else during his military career. Impossible just meant no one had figured out how to do it yet. He started running. The first obstacle was a spinning blade that moved in a pattern he couldn't predict. Instead of trying to time it, he slid underneath it on his belly. The blade whistled over his head, close enough to cut his hair. The second obstacle was a wall that seemed to have no handholds. But Jake noticed something. The wall had tiny imperfections. Places where a human finger might find purchase. He began to climb, using techniques he had learned from rock climbers back on Earth. Behind him, he heard surprised muttering from the other students. Apparently, they had expected him to fail immediately. The third obstacle was a gap that seemed impossible to cross. Jake watched it for 30 seconds, timing everything. Then he noticed something the course designers probably hadn't considered. The gap was just wide enough for a human to span if he was willing to use his whole body as a bridge. He jumped, caught the far edge with his hands, and swung his body across. His feet found purchase on the other side, and he rolled to safety. "Interesting," Vextar said. "Continue." Jake pushed through the rest of the course. Where other species might use natural advantages, he used human ingenuity. Where they relied on strength, he used leverage. Where they used speed, he used timing. When he finished, he was bleeding from a dozen cuts, and his uniform was torn. But he had completed the course in a time that wasn't embarrassing. "Adequate," Vextar said, "for a human." The next student was a draconian, a reptilian being with natural armor and reflexes that made him look like a blur. He completed the course in half Jake's time, barely breathing hard. "This is why humans don't belong here," the draconian said as he passed Jake. "You're too slow, too weak, too limited." Jake said nothing. He just watched and learned. The days that followed were a blur of pain and discovery. Jake learned that draconians were fast, but couldn't change direction quickly. Ethereals could read minds, but were vulnerable to sudden loud noises. Krillians were strong, but had blind spots in their vision. He also learned that humans had advantages no one had considered. They could adapt to almost any environment. They could function on less sleep than most species. And they could think in ways that seemed chaotic to alien minds. "You're doing something wrong," Amy told him during one of their rare conversations. They were in the medical bay, where Jake was getting stitches from yet another training accident. "What do you mean? You're not supposed to be surviving this. The program is designed to break humans. Vextar has been studying our species for months. He knows exactly how to make us quit." Jake winced as the medical droid sealed a cut on his arm. Maybe he doesn't know us as well as he thinks. 3 other humans quit or broke down. What makes you different? Jake thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just too stupid to know. When I'm beaten. That night, Jake lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. His body was a map of injuries. Bruises, cuts, and muscle strains covered him from head to toe. But his mind was clear. He was learning things about alien combat that no human had ever known. Human, a voice said in the darkness. Jake turned to see Thrakmor, the crystal being, standing beside his bunk. The creature's body caught the dim light and scattered it in patterns that hurt to look at. Having trouble sleeping? Jake asked. I do not sleep as you understand it. I was observing your training today. You are adapting, trying to. The other species are beginning to notice. They speak of you in their dormitories. Some with respect, others with fear. Fear of me? Not of you specifically, of what you represent. Humans are unpredictable. You do not follow the patterns other species expect. This makes you dangerous. Jake sat up. Dangerous how? In combat, predictability is often survival. If I know how you will move, I can counter your movements. But humans ... Thrakmor paused. Humans improvise. You change tactics mid-fight. You use weapons in ways they were not designed for. You sacrifice pieces of yourself to gain advantages. And that scares them? It should. Tell me, human, do you know why Vextar broke your nose on the first day? Jake touched his healing nose. It was setting crooked, just as he had planned, to establish dominance. Incorrect. He broke your nose because his research told him that humans respond to physical humiliation by withdrawing. He expected you to quit within days. Well, his research was wrong. Yes, and that is what has him concerned. If his research was wrong about human psychology, what else might be wrong? What other assumptions about your species might be incorrect? Jake lay back down. So what happens now? Now, I believe Instructor Vextar will escalate. He will try harder to break you. The question is whether you can continue to adapt faster than he can adapt to you. As Thrakmor drifted away, Jake closed his eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, new tests designed to prove that humans didn't belong among the galaxy's warriors. But tonight, he was still here, still learning, still finding ways to turn human weaknesses into strengths. His nose throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of that first day. But now it felt different. Not like a mark of shame, but like a promise. He would show them what humans could do. 3 months into the program, Jake had learned to read the station's rhythms. He knew when the ethereals would be at their weakest. He understood the feeding schedules of the crystalline beings. He had mapped the blind spots in Krillian vision and the reaction times of draconian reflexes. But more importantly, he had learned something that surprised even him. He was no longer just surviving. He was succeeding. The human scores are impossible, he heard an instructor say as he passed. A doorway. Either our tests are flawed, or ... or what? That was Vextar's voice. Or we have been wrong about human capabilities. Jake kept walking, but he filed the conversation away. Change was coming. He could feel it in the way other students looked at him now. The mockery had been replaced by something else. Curiosity, and in some cases, respect. Morrison! Jake turned to see Ryan Tucker jogging toward him. Ryan was another human, an engineering specialist who had arrived 2 weeks ago. He was younger than Jake, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy that came from being very smart and very aware of how outmatched he was. Jake, thank God, Ryan said, slightly out of breath. I need your help. They've got me doing combat simulations with the Shard Collective, and I'm getting destroyed. How are you not dead yet? Jake looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Because I stopped thinking like a human. What do you mean? Come on, I'll show you. Jake led Ryan to one of the smaller training rooms. It was empty except for a few practice weapons and some basic obstacle equipment. Jake picked up a staff designed for Krillian combat, too heavy for human hands, with a balance that felt wrong. Every species here has natural advantages, Jake said. Draconians are fast. Krillians are strong. Ethereals can read minds. Humans have none of those things. Right. So we're screwed. No. Jake hefted the staff. We're free. He demonstrated a move that looked like standard Krillian combat technique, but with a twist. Instead of relying on strength to drive the staff forward, he used leverage and momentum. The result was a strike that would have surprised a Krillian opponent. See? They expect their opponents to fight like them. But we don't have to. We can fight like humans. Ryan's eyes lit up. You're improvising. Exactly. Watch. Jake spent the next hour teaching Ryan techniques he had developed. Ways to use human flexibility against rigid alien fighting styles. Methods for turning human endurance into a weapon. Tactics that relied on unpredictability rather than raw power. This is incredible, Ryan said. You're creating an entirely new fighting system. I'm creating a human fighting system, Jake corrected. Question is, will it work when it really matters? The answer came 2 days later. Today, we test your leadership abilities, Vexstar announced to the assembled students. You will be divided into mixed species teams. Each team will face a scenario based on real combat situations. The team that performs best will receive additional privileges. The team that performs worst will lose their next rest period. Jake found himself assigned to a team with 3 other beings, a draconian named Sisk, an ethereal called Whisper, and a Krillian warrior named Thak. On paper, it should have been a strong team. In reality, it was a disaster waiting to happen. I should lead, Sisk said immediately. Draconians are natural commanders. Leadership requires wisdom, not just speed, Thak rumbled. Krillian tactical doctrine is proven. Both of you think. In only 3 dimensions, Whisper's voice echoed in their minds. I can sense the enemy's intentions. All 3 looked at Jake expectantly. He was the obvious weak link, the one who would follow whatever plan they created. What do you think, human? Sisk asked. Jake looked at the scenario they had been given. It was a rescue mission in a hostile environment. The enemy had superior numbers and defensive positions. According to the briefing, it was based on a real battle where a coalition force had been wiped out. I think, Jake said slowly, that we're approaching this wrong. Explain, Thek demanded. This scenario is designed to test how well we can work together as different species. But look at the original battle. The coalition force failed because they tried to fight like their individual species instead of fighting like a team. Jake pulled up the tactical display. The Draconians used speed attacks. The Krillians used frontal assault. The Ethereals tried to use mental manipulation. Each species did what they do best. And Sisk was getting impatient. And they all died because the enemy was ready for those tactics. They knew how each species would fight. Jake highlighted several points on the display. But what if we don't fight like our species? What if we fight like something new? The next hour was spent planning. Jake found himself doing something he had never expected, teaching alien warriors to think like humans. He showed them how to use deception, how to change tactics mid-battle, how to sacrifice apparent advantages for real ones. This is chaos, Thek complained. Exactly, Jake replied. And chaos is hard to predict. When the simulation began, Jake's team did something no other team had done. They didn't use their natural advantages. Instead, they used human tactics adapted for alien abilities. Sisk used his speed not for direct attack, but for misdirection. Thak used his strength not for frontal assault, but for creating diversions. Whisper used telepathy not to attack enemy minds, but to coordinate the team's movements in perfect silence. The result was a victory that surprised everyone, including the instructors. "Interesting," Vexstar said afterward. "Explain your tactics." "We fought like humans," Jake replied simply. "Humans," Vexstar repeated. "The species with no natural advantages." "No natural advantages," Jake agreed. "Which means we're not limited by them." At night, Jake's team celebrated their victory. But Jake found himself thinking about something else. The simulation had been based on a real battle. A battle where beings had died because they couldn't adapt. "Jake," a voice said behind him. He turned to see Amy approaching. She looked tired, and there was something in her expression that made him concerned. "What's wrong?" "I just got word from Earth. Colonel Brad Harrison is coming to inspect the program. He'll be here in 2 weeks. Jake knew Harrison. He was a good officer, but he was also a realist. If he thought the program was too dangerous, he would pull the human participants out. How much does he know about what's been happening here? He knows 3 humans have already failed. He knows you've been injured multiple times. He knows the program is designed to break us, but he doesn't know that I've been succeeding." Amy shook her head. "He doesn't know that you've been changing things, that you've been teaching aliens to fight like humans, that you've been proving humans can adapt to anything." Jake looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was taking its first steps into a larger galaxy. The decisions made here would affect how other species saw his people for generations to come. "Then I guess I better give him something impressive to see. Jake, what are you planning?" He turned back to her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm planning to show the galaxy what humans can do when they stop trying to be anything else." In the distance, he could hear Vexstar's voice echoing through the corridors. The instructor was talking to someone about the human problem and escalating measures. Jake touched his crooked nose and felt that familiar determination rising in his chest. The real test was just beginning. Colonel Brad Harrison arrived on a Tuesday morning, and Jake could tell immediately that the man was not impressed. Harrison was old-school military, the kind of officer who believed in discipline, order, and doing things the way they had always been done. His eyes swept over the alien academy with the look of someone who had seen too much strangeness in his career. "Captain Morrison," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I've come to evaluate the human participation in this program." "Yes, sir," Jake replied, standing at attention. His face still showed the marks of recent training. A healing cut over his left eye, bruises on his jaw, and of course, the crooked nose that had become his trademark. Harrison's eyes lingered on Jake's injuries. "How many times have you been to the medical bay?" 17 times, sir." "And yet you're still here." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Jake considered his answer carefully. "Because someone has to be, sir. Someone has to show them what humans can do." Harrison nodded slowly. "I'll be observing your training for the next week. After that, I'll make my recommendation about whether to continue the program." What Jake didn't know was that Harrison's arrival had prompted Vexstar to make a decision. The Krillian instructor had been watching Jake's progress with growing concern. Not only had the human survived, but he had begun to change the dynamics of the entire academy. Other students were adopting human tactics. Instructors were questioning their methods. The natural order was being disrupted. "The human has become a problem," Vexstar told the other instructors that evening. "He influences the other students. He makes them think that natural advantages don't matter." "Perhaps," said Instructor Velinara, an ethereal who oversaw psychic combat training, "that is a valuable lesson." "It is a dangerous lesson," Vexstar replied. "If students believe they can overcome any disadvantage through will alone, they will take unnecessary risks. They will die." or they will find ways to survive that we never imagined, Velinara countered, but Vextar had already made his decision. If standard training methods couldn't break the human, then he would have to try something else. The next morning, Jake woke to find Amy missing from her bunk. He asked around, but no one had seen her. It wasn't until the afternoon training session that he learned what had happened. Lieutenant Cole volunteered for a special exercise, Vextar announced. She is currently in the advanced survival chamber, testing her limits. Jake's blood ran cold. The advanced survival chamber was notorious among the students. It was designed to simulate the worst possible combat conditions: toxic atmosphere, crushing gravity, extreme temperature variations, and hostile terrain. Even the strongest species found it challenging. When did she start? Jake asked. 6 hours ago, Vextar replied. The exercise is designed to last 12 hours. She has 6 hours remaining. Jake knew Amy well enough to know she wouldn't have volunteered for something that dangerous. She was smart, careful, and aware of her limitations as a human, which meant Vextar had forced her into it somehow. I'd like to observe, Jake said. Of course, perhaps you can learn something from her inevitable failure. Jake made his way to the observation deck overlooking the survival chamber. What he saw made his hands clench into fists. Amy was barely conscious, struggling to breathe in an atmosphere that was slowly poisoning her. A gravity was set to 3 times Earth normal, making every movement a struggle, and the temperature was dropping steadily. She's dying, Jake said. She is learning her limits, Vextar replied. As you learned yours when I broke your nose? This is different. This isn't training. This is attempted murder. Vextar's red eyes fixed on Jake. Careful, human. Your words approach insubordination. Jake watched Amy collapse to her knees, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. Her life. Signs were dropping toward critical levels. In less than an hour, she would be dead. I challenge you, Jake said quietly. The observation deck went silent. Even the alien students who had been watching stopped talking. What did you say? Vextar asked. I challenge you to single combat, under Krillian honor law. If I win, you stop the exercise and never target another human again. If you win. Jake paused. If you win, I'll leave the academy and recommend that Earth withdraw from the program. Vextar's mouth split into that razor-sharp smile. You would challenge me? A Krillian warrior with 4 arms and natural armor? You, a soft human with no advantages? I would. And you believe you can win? Jake looked down at Amy, who was now unconscious in the chamber. I believe I can try. Very well. Vextar's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Under Krillian law, you have the right to 3 days to prepare. We will meet in the main combat arena. All students and instructors will witness your defeat. As word of the challenge spread through the academy, Jake found himself at the center of a storm. Some students thought he was brave. Others thought he was insane. But all of them knew that this fight would determine more than just his fate. It would determine humanity's place in the galactic community. Ryan Tucker found Jake in the training room that evening, practicing with various weapons. This is suicide, Ryan said bluntly. Vextar has been fighting for longer than humans have had written language. He's bigger, stronger, faster, and he has 4 arms. I know, Jake replied, continuing to practice a complex sword pattern. So why are you doing this? Jake stopped and looked at his friend. Because if I don't, Amy dies. And if Amy dies, it proves that humans can't handle this environment. The program ends, and Earth becomes a minor player in galactic politics. But if you fight him and lose, you'll be dead. Maybe, but if I fight him and win, I prove that humans can compete with any species in the galaxy. Ryan was quiet for a moment. What do you need? I need you to help me study Krillian anatomy. I need to understand exactly how their bodies work, where their weak points are, how their four-armed fighting style creates vulnerabilities. And then I need to forget everything I've learned about fair fighting and remember everything I've learned about winning. The next morning, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Harrison entered the training room where Jake was practicing, his expression unreadable. "I've been watching you for 2 days," Harrison said. "I've seen your test scores, your injury reports, and your tactical innovations. I've also heard about your challenge." "Sir, I can explain." "No need. I've also been talking to the other instructors." "Do you know what they tell me about you?" Jake shook his head. "They tell me that you've changed this academy. That students who used to rely purely on natural advantages are now learning to adapt and improvise. That tactical doctrines that have been used for centuries are being questioned and improved." Harrison walked closer. "They tell me that you're teaching aliens to fight like humans, and that it's making them better warriors." "Sir, I was just trying to survive." "No, Captain. You were doing what humans do best. You were adapting. You were finding ways to turn disadvantages into advantages. You were proving that intelligence and determination can overcome any natural limitation." Harrison placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. "I came here to shut down this program. Instead, I'm going to recommend that we expand it. But first, you have to survive the next 2 days. I'll do my best, sir." "I know you will. But Jake, don't try to fight him like a Krillian. Fight him like a human. Fight him like the human who's been proving for 4 months that we belong here." As Harrison left, Jake returned to his training. He had 1 more day to prepare for a fight that would determine not just his fate, but the fate of humanity's place. Among the stars dot in the distance, he could hear the sounds of the academy, aliens from dozens of species training together, learning from each other, becoming something more than what they were alone. Tomorrow, he would show them all what humans could achieve when they stopped trying to be anything other than human. The main combat arena had never seen anything like this. Representatives from 47 different species filled the observation decks, their various forms creating a living rainbow of alien anatomy. Word of the challenge had spread beyond the academy. This was no longer just a training exercise. This was a test of humanity's place in the galactic community. Jake stood in the center of the arena, wearing simple combat gear. No armor, no enhanced weapons, nothing but human determination and 4 months of hard-learned lessons. His crooked nose throbbed with each heartbeat, a reminder of how this all began. Across from him, Vexstar looked like a monument to violence. 8 feet tall, 4 arms ending in clawed hands, natural armor that could deflect most weapons. The Krillian instructor had been fighting for over 2 centuries. He had never lost a formal challenge. "Are you ready to die, human?" Vexstar asked, his voice carrying across the arena. Jake looked up at the observation deck and saw familiar faces. Amy was there, recovered from her ordeal in the survival chamber. Ryan Tucker gave him a thumbs up. Colonel Harrison watched with the intensity of a man who knew history was being made. Even Thrakemore, the crystal being who had become his unlikely friend, was present. "I'm ready to show you what humans can do," Jake replied. The arena fell silent. Then a bell rang, and the fight began. Vexstar moved like lightning, all 4 arms striking at once. Jake had studied this. Krillian combat doctrine relied on overwhelming force and speed. Most opponents would try to block or dodge. Jake did neither. He threw himself forward, inside Vexstar's reach, and drove his elbow into the instructor's solar plexus. It was like hitting a wall, but Jake had learned something important. Even natural armor had weak points. Vexstar stumbled, surprised by the human's willingness to trade damage for position. 2 of his arms swept down to grab Jake, but the human was already moving. He rolled between Vexstar's legs and came up behind him. "Stand and fight," Vexstar roared, spinning around. "I am fighting," Jake replied, dancing away from another four-armed assault. "I'm fighting like a human." What followed was unlike any combat the Academy had ever seen. Vexstar fought like a traditional Krillian warrior, powerful, direct, relying on natural advantages. Jake fought like something new. He used the arena's obstacles as weapons. He struck and moved, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. He turned Vexstar's strength against him, using the instructor's own momentum to create openings. "This is impossible," Jake heard someone say from the observation deck. The human should have been killed in the first 30 seconds. But Jake wasn't just surviving. He was learning. Every exchange taught him something new about Krillian anatomy, about the way four arms could create blind spots, about how natural armor could actually limit movement. 20 minutes into the fight, Vexstar was breathing hard. His powerful strikes were becoming less precise. Jake, meanwhile, was covered in cuts and bruises, but he was still moving, still adapting. "You cannot win," Vexstar growled. "I am stronger, faster, better armed." "You're right," Jake agreed, wiping blood from his mouth. "But I'm human, and humans don't need to be better. We just need to be more stubborn." Jake had been watching for his opportunity, and now he saw it. Vexstar's fighting style left him vulnerable for a split second after each four-armed combination. It was a tiny window, barely a heartbeat, but it was enough that the next time Vexstar attacked, Jake didn't dodge. He stepped forward, accepting a blow to his ribs that cracked bone. But that put him exactly where he needed to be. Jake grabbed Vexstar's primary right arm and used a joint lock he had learned from studying draconian anatomy. At the same time, he drove his knee into a pressure point that Ryan had identified in their anatomical studies. The combination of human wrestling, alien joint manipulation, and precise anatomical knowledge created something that had never been seen before. Vexstar roared in pain and surprise as his arm was hyperextended. But Jake wasn't done. He spun around. The instructor's massive form, using techniques borrowed from 6 different species, and applied pressure to specific points along Vexstar's spine. There was a sound like breaking stone. Vexstar's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the arena floor. Jake stood over the fallen instructor, holding a piece of Vexstar's spinal armor that had broken away during the final combination. The arena was completely silent. "It's over," Jake sighed, his voice carrying in the stillness. "You yield." Vexstar tried to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. The precise application of pressure to his nerve clusters had temporarily paralyzed his lower body. He was alive, but defeated. "I yield," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The arena erupted. Alien beings that had never seen anything like this were cheering, roaring, making sounds of approval in languages Jake didn't recognize. But he barely heard them. He was focused on Vexstar. "You fought well," Jake said, kneeling beside the instructor. "But you made one mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed that because humans have no natural advantages, we have no advantages at all. But you are wrong. We have one advantage that no other species has." "What?" Jake held up the piece of spinal armor. "We can learn from anyone. We can adapt to anything. And we never, ever give up." Medical teams rushed into the arena to tend to Vexstar. The damage wasn't permanent. Jake had been careful about that. But it would be weeks before the instructor could walk normally again. As Jake was helped to his own medical treatment, he passed the observation deck. Colonel Harrison was there, and the look on his face was one of pure pride. "Hell of a fight, Captain," Harrison said. "Thank you, sir. Will you be recommending continuation of the program?" Harrison's smile was answer enough. I'll be recommending expansion. A galaxy needs to see what humans can do when they stop apologizing for being human. 6 months later, Jake stood at the graduation ceremony. He wore the uniform of an Apex Instructor, the highest honor the Academy could bestow. Around him, graduates from 47 species prepared to return to their homeworlds, carrying with them new tactics, new strategies, and a new understanding of what was possible. Amy had been promoted to head of the new Human Combat Innovation Department. Ryan was designing new training programs that incorporated human adaptability principles. Even Thrakemore had requested to stay and study human tactical thinking, and Vextar, the former instructor, had requested to train under Jake to understand what he called the human way of war. The Krillian warrior, who had once broken Jake's nose, now served as his assistant instructor, teaching other aliens how to think like humans. Congratulations, graduates, Jake said, addressing the assembled beings. You came here as representatives of your species. You leave as something more. You leave as warriors who understand that strength comes not from what you are born with, but from what you choose to become. As the ceremony ended, Jake touched his crooked nose one last time. It had healed wrong, just as he had intended, but it no longer reminded him of humiliation. It reminded him of the moment when humanity had announced its arrival on the galactic stage. The galaxy was vast, filled with species that were faster, stronger, and more naturally gifted than humans. But as Jake looked out at the stars, he knew that none of that mattered. Humans were here. They were learning. They were adapting, and they were never going to stop. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of the next class beginning their training. Among them were 3 more humans, ready to prove that their species belonged among the stars. Jake smiled and walked toward the training bay. He had work to do. After all, someone had to teach the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they stopped trying to be anything other than magnificently, stubbornly, adaptably human.